My school bully kissed me with passion I never knew in front of a girl. This is what dreams are made of. That was literally what I was thinking when I found out that I got to direct this year's school musical. It might not be a lot for some, but as someone who has always been regarded as the school loser and the geek whose existence was always forgotten, this meant everything to me. Mrs. Robbins just had informed me that she decided to assign the very prestigious role of musical director to me for the upcoming winter musical. This spot has always been sought after, and seeing as I am now a high school senior at Woodgrove High, this was my last shot at being a musical director, and I did it. Liam, I got it, I exclaimed as I greeted my best friend, Liam Martin. I'm this year's musical director. Liam hugged me tightly. I knew it. Congratulations. I can't wait for the musical, Dee. It will be the best one yet, he congratulated me. I heard a snicker and boisterous laughter behind us. I turned around to see a group of 4 boys and a girl. It was Clark Stewart, the captain of the basketball team, and his pack of goons. All of the boys were from the basketball team, so they were really popular, and not to mention they were massive bullies, who seemed to feast on the misery of losers like me. Along with them was Hannah Shepard, who also happened to be famous at Woodgrove, and the last I heard, she and Clark Stewart were dating. You're directing the musical? No way. You're not ruining the production, I won't let you, Hannah threatened. I'm getting the lead role, Peyton, and I will not let you dull my spotlight. Chill, Han, said Gilbert, one of the boys. You think a weirdo like Peyton will be allowed to direct the school musical? He's a walking disaster. This elicited laughter from the group. Yeah, he'd be allowed to direct the school musical, replied Charleston, if the school was trying to sabotage itself. This earned even more obnoxiously loud laughter from the group. You two screwing each other? Asked a man named Harold casually. Man, do they even allow gays in theaters? More laughter ensued before Clark started walking away and his minions followed. That guy infuriated me. For a man so popular, he was quiet. But then again, he surrounded himself with people like that, so how quiet could he really be? Don't worry, Dee. Don't let them get to your head. They're just jealous you're up to do great things while they draw satisfaction from trivial happenings. Liam comforted me. Hannah Shepard was a nightmare to work with. It turns out that she was not lying about getting the lead role in the musical. Apparently, her father had pulled some strings with the school committee and landed her the role. She was one obnoxious actress and a major bully at every turn. She made sure to make suggestive jokes about my relationship with Liam, who happened to be working on stage production. Are you sure you two are not secretly making out behind the curtains whenever we're on break? She teased before she turned to the male actors. Don't know about you guys, but I feel uncomfortable having these two around here. Knowing that they could be gay and everything really gives me the ick. I rolled my eyes and walked away, unfazed by her blatant homophobia. How I wish someone would stand up to her, but apparently, everyone else is too scared of what her father may do to them. I ignored her snark comments on most days because despite my intense dislike for Hannah, I wanted the musical to be successful and I tried my best to work well with her. Just as I thought, I could survive the next few months. Mrs. Robbins delivered the news that made my heart sink. As you know, we're still in the search for one male lead to complement Hannah's role and some other backup roles. Unfortunately, we will be canceling the auditions for these roles next week, announced Mrs. Robbins. My mouth opened in disbelief. Wait, Mrs. Robbins, how come? Who will fill in our missing roles? I questioned. Our principal, Miss Jenkins, talked to me earlier this morning, and we have agreed to give the role to another student as punishment for a school violation, explained Mrs. Robbins. These students by no means want in on the play, which is why they'll strive to excel in it so they will not be embarrassed in front of the entire student body. Who? I asked. The lead role will go to Clark Stewart. My heart sank. This was the worst possible scenario. And it was even aggravated by Miss Robbins' revelation that Clark's little minions will also be in the play as supporting actors. Apparently, they were caught vandalizing school property and were sanctioned by the principal. But Mrs. Robbins, won't they ruin the show? I asked stupidly, in disbelief that this was happening. I've put so much work into this musical now. I was not going to let 4 stupid boys, especially Clark Stewart, ruin the show. Darling, that's our job now. This is punishment for them. This musical will be their sole extracurricular activity, seeing as they are not allowed anywhere near the basketball team as punishment too. See it as their penance and help them excel in it, Mrs. Robbins said patiently. I have to give props to the woman. She always saw the best in everyone. Everyone except Hannah seemed to be despondent because of the news. It was bad enough that we had this diva on the set, but now she was extremely delighted that Clark Stewart was going to be her on-screen partner, it seems. It was going to be one hell of a musical. The first day that we had Clark and his friends for rehearsal was migraine-inducing. While his friends were boisterous like Hannah and constantly threw every possible insult at me except when Mrs. Robbins was around, Clark was a stark contrast. He simply sat there, watching his minions do all the work, while he probably feasted on my misery. I saw him staring at me absent-mindedly a few times though, like plotting how he was going to make my life a living hell. I was so tempted to ask him what he was staring at, but that would surely earn me another week's worth of bullying from his minions. The next few days, we started reading the lines. Clark was not nearly as difficult to work with as his female counterpart. He was giving very minimal energy at first, as though he could not be bothered to be there, but one thing that I appreciated about him was that he listened. He was not too rebellious like Hannah was. The latter seems to be doing everything she could to oppose my requests. Next to his group of minions and Hannah, Clark Stewart was shaping up to be quite an angel. I tried to disregard the butterflies in my stomach whenever I hear his deep resounding voice read lines, or my consistent nervous heartbeats whenever he would run his hands through his blonde locks. It was a habit of his that he did a lot. Based on my observation, he mostly ignored me though, except when I was giving feedback or instructions to which he would normally nod or shrug or simply follow orders. The only thing left to bother me besides the presence of the pack of bullies was Hannah's constant need to fondle Clark. It seemed like she was doing it on purpose, in front of me, casually running her hand up and down Clark's forearm or resting her head on his shoulder. He did not seem to mind, but he also seemed impartial to it, not really returning her gestures. Surprisingly, Clark Stewart became bearable on set. In fact, I discovered that he was a quick learner, and although he was still somewhat cold, he was a contrast to his other friends who were virtually useless on set, and more of a liability rather than actual assets of the production. I also found myself starting to fawn over Clark's singing voice. I did not even know that the guy could sing. Well, he was mainly known for being an excellent basketball player, and I knew him because I was his friend's #1 person to bully. One afternoon after rehearsals, I was left alone in the set because I wanted to check some props when Clark walked into the theater. I did not utter a single word, pretending not to see him and acting like I was busy with props. "Hey, did you see my basketball in here?" he asked casually, his deep voice sending shivers down my spine. I shook my head. "You didn't bring a basketball in today. Been spending your time looking at me, huh?" he teased, and I was certain that I was blushing furiously at this point. I do not know what went into me. I mustered up all the courage in my body to stand up to him. "Maybe it's you've been staring at me. I see you, you know," I retorted. He looked away, pretending to look for a basketball he never even brought on set. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said weakly. The change in his voice told me all that I needed to know. "What do you need from me, huh? I bet it's something you're embarrassed to say in front of your friends," I said. He sighed. "I need help," he whispered, as though afraid that anyone would hear him in the deserted theater. "I need help with my lines. I need help rehearsing them." I raised my eyebrow. "You're doing great. In fact, you're really excelling. I'm surprised." "Individually, yes, but with Hannah, whenever we read our lines or rehearse, it's not working, you know? Something's lacking," he explained. "Will you help me?" I contemplated, thinking of all the horrible memories I've had because of him and his friends, but I relented and justified it as wanting the best for the musical. "Okay, stay back after every rehearsal with the group. We'll practice together after the group leaves every day," I replied. "Can you keep this between us?" he questioned. I smiled weakly. I expected that. He would rather cut his own arm than be seen with me. "Don't want to be seen hanging out with a loser, do you?" I asked back. "All good with me." "No, I just don't want you to be more of a target of bullying than you already are." Clark and I fell into an easy routine. In the early afternoons, we would rehearse with the group, which basically meant we did not talk unless it was absolutely necessary. Well, it was me who did most of the talking, and he just complied. I always had to toil through the afternoons, enduring remark after remark from Hannah, who made insults towards me like it was her hobby. The other boys from the friend group, while being slightly less terrible than Hannah, were still bullies nonetheless. Their teasing mainly consisted of insisting that Liam and I were a couple, my geekiness or my incompetence as a musical director. Their insults were no longer hurtful to me though. They enter one ear and leave another. But I found myself trudging through these long hours for my late afternoon session with Clark, whom I have been confiding to recently. It was an unexpected friendship, a secret one at that, but his presence was comforting to me. Beyond his hard exterior, I found that he was a man of substance and that he was much more than just a school bully. In fact, that was a notion that I have been questioning since my conversation with him. "You do know that I still consider you a bully, right?" I questioned while we were seated side by side in the theater. He nodded, suddenly turning and staring so deep into my eyes. He was so close that I could hardly hear his staccato breathing and his warm breath against my face. "I know," he replied softly. "I don't deny it." I sighed, but you don't even partake in the bullying. I've never really heard you utter a mean word. It's just your friends and the people you associate yourself with, I explained. Exactly. I stand and do nothing. Isn't that worse? I know something's wrong and I don't act on it. Why don't you dissociate with them? You're a good basketball player and even a better singer. You have a bright future. Don't ruin it, I advised. You think of me so highly, Dennis. I'm not as good of a person as you think I am. Bully, remember? He argued. I simply stared at him. He was beautiful. Despite his flaws and his past, he was undeniably beautiful. I said no more and simply looked at him. I love moments like this when we pretend to be in our own bubble, away from judgmental eyes and a status quo. That said, people like us could not be friends. What, something on my face? Clark asked. No, it's just the first time you called me by my first name. You always called me by my last name. It's always Peyton, I explained. Get used to it, Dennis. Our secret friendship continued, and session after session I could see Clark gradually improving his acting. However, when it came to actually practicing his scenes with Hannah during our formal rehearsals, it all goes down the drain. One particular afternoon, after they had just delivered their lines about 5 times with no hint of chemistry at all, I grew increasingly frustrated. You guys, this isn't acceptable. We've been practicing for weeks now. Why is it that you two have zero chemistry? I ranted. Hannah was evidently offended by my statement. No chemistry? Are you stupid, Peyton? She retorted. The rest of the set went quiet, not wanting to oppose the diva star. No, I'm not stupid, I said as a matter of fact, dodging her bullying as I always do. You two seriously need to work on your chemistry. This musical has to be the best, guys. Those in the drama club, let's work together and help our lead actors find their groove. It's our last shot to deliver a great play. Let's do it with our heart and soul. Passion, we need that. We have passion, right, Clark? Said Hannah in her annoying high-pitched voice while attempting to rub Clark's forearm. He brushed it away, to my surprise though. He then stood up and kissed me square on the lips in front of everyone, without warning. He swept me off my feet and hungrily devoured my lips. The kiss was not gentle, it was rough, it was intense, it was passionate. You wanted passion, he said? I'll give you passion. There were gasps from the crowd, and Hannah stormed out of the rehearsal in disbelief of what had happened. Thankfully, Mrs. Robbins entered the theater that very moment, and told us that the theater would be needed for a parent-teacher conference, so we had to leave. Thank goodness she cancelled that afternoon's rehearsal because I absolutely had no idea how to face the rest of the cast and crew after Clark kissed me. Before I could even sneak in a word, he left the theater, hurriedly, his minions of boys following shortly behind. I do not know what got to me, but I went to the theater at mine and Clark's usual time. We usually started our one-on-one rehearsals at 5 p.m. because that would give us ample time to pretend to go home and wait for everyone else to leave after our usual rehearsals with the crew. I went into the theater aware that I would have been 15 minutes late already. I fully expected being alone in the theater, with the parent-teacher conference ending half an hour ago. But there, seated on the front row, was Clark. He was tapping his foot, and as soon as he heard my footsteps, he turned around. You're late, he said. I didn't know if we'll be practicing together since our formal rehearsal got cancelled today, I replied. He sighed. We said we'd practice every school day, right? I nodded, suddenly feeling a twinge of guilt. Yeah, I'm sorry. I kept my word. I said I'll show up at 5 p.m. here every day. Keep yours too, Dennis. I addressed the elephant in the room before anything else. Why did you kiss me? I questioned him, finally mustering up the courage. You said you wanted passion. I was honest. I didn't have it with Hannah. I never have. But with you, I feel it. It's natural, he confessed. And I plan to do it over and over again if you let me. My heart was thumping so wildly in my chest, and butterflies were all over my stomach. How could this be happening? I wanted Clark Stewart, the so-called school bully, the captain of the basketball team and the lead actor of my musical production, and the polar opposite of me. And he wanted me back? Clark, I said weakly. I reciprocate his feelings. The sentiments I had for him had been building up, and try as I may to deny that we had chemistry, I felt it from the very first day I spoke to him. Your friends, the school, they won't take it well. So, they don't know about us. They don't know how patient you've been in trying to help me. They don't know how I get your geeky Star Wars reference because we share the same love for the films. They don't know how happy you make me every time you ramble on about the things you love. And then it was my turn to kiss him. I ran my hands through his soft hair. You're really not a bully, are you? I asked. Never was, but if I have to be the one to defend you, I would be, he said sweetly. Hannah turned out quite vindictive. The very next day, she was already hell-bent on making my life a living hell. As soon as I arrived in school, I felt that something was off. I was getting so many stares and occasional giggles. I did not know what was going on until I opened my locker and a sheet of paper fell off. Printed on the sheet of paper was an edited picture of me and Liam kissing, and below was a caption: "A Gay Christmas," essentially replacing our school's musical name from A White Christmas. I was so embarrassed. The photo looked all too realistic, and I felt bad that Liam had to be dragged into this. I knew it was Hannah's doing the moment I saw it, and now that I knew, those judgmental stares and giggles made me want to puke. "You like the new promotional flyers?" Hannah asked from behind me. "Here, have some so you can promote our very beloved musical." I took the rest of the flyers from her furiously, wanting to burn them at the earliest possible time. "Now you know who not to mess with, kid. Back off, Clark's mine," she asserted. "Clark is no one's property. He doesn't even like you," I replied. "Don't call him Clark. Who are you to refer to him like that? You're a nobody, a loser, a nerd," she shouted. "Yo, back off, Peyton, before we print some more and even edit in your mom in there for some action," joked Charleston, one of the guy bullies in their clique. At this point I was numb, in utter disbelief that these people could be so cruel for the shallowest reasons. "Get away from Clark, or we'll paste these everywhere in the school and make sure everyone sees your gay ass," Harold threatened. Just then a booming voice snapped me out of my reverie. "He's not going anywhere," he said plainly. "And you, stop that before I report you to the principal." The group was flabbergasted, clearly in awe that Clark was not taking their side. "Oh my god, you like this gay-ass director?" exclaimed Hannah. "God, Clark, remind me why I ever liked you. You're just like this Peyton guy. You're a disgrace." At that moment, Clark grabbed my hand and wanted to take me away from them. My heart started beating quickly again, feeling protected and safe with him by my side. "Bro, come on, this isn't you," Gilbert implored. "You guys should do something productive with your time. Don't let this evil girl whose only hobby is to make others' lives hells so hers could look good," advised Clark. "And those posters will go, or I'll be the first to report you to the principal." At that point, they all walked away, and I saw Charleston dumping the rest of the flyers in the trash can. I guess Clark had that kind of impact on them. "Are you okay?" asked Clark, grabbing my face in between his hands. I blushed furiously, conscious of the people around us, but they did not seem to mind. I suppose they were all too scared that Clark would go after them next if they sent any judgmental looks on our way. "I'm okay, thank you," I replied. He kissed the top of my head and helped me carry our books before we walked to class together. Not long after the fake posters, Hannah continued to be relentless in trying to make my life miserable. I was entering my English class one morning when I bumped into Liam, who looked so despondent. "Hey, I heard," he said. "I'm so sorry. We did the best we could." "What?" I asked, puzzled. "Surely you received the text about the cancellation of the musical." "They're true, right?" he mentioned. My mouth dropped in shock, reading the text that said A White Christmas was cancelled due to the lack of funding and support from the school's board of directors. "No freaking way! The budget just got approval last night," I exclaimed. "This is fake. Ticket sales are tomorrow, and with this text going around, we'll be selling none." "That was the point," winked Hannah as she stealthily brushed past me. "I'm not done yet." I was miserable all morning, thinking that no one was going to buy the tickets anymore, and that our show would be flopping. I knew that Hannah was determined to make the musical unsuccessful since she officially dropped out of the lead actress role, and currently we were still in search of a replacement. Clark found out about Hannah's scheme and assured me that everything will be alright. It'll all work out. You'll find a much better replacement for her and tickets will sell out, okay? Don't worry about it. I got you. I promise," he said. I felt much more relieved then, knowing that Clark always kept his word. True enough, the tickets were sold out within 2 hours of their release the next day. Instead of relying on the stationary ticket booth, Clark came up with a plan, and the rest of his basketball teammates, minus the minions who were working with Hannah, helped him execute it. They split the tickets between them and roamed the school hallways to encourage students to buy. Seeing as they were popular varsity basketball players, this turned out to be a massive success, and it warmed my heart to garner their support. "That's amazing. Your teammates are so supportive," I told Clark later that day. He nodded. "I'm so lucky to have them," he said. "Except Gilbert, Charleston, and Harold, of course." "They don't mind that you've come out as gay?" I asked wearily, not wanting to face any discrimination at the time. "Babe, I'm the captain. Of course they don't mind," he said cockily, but I knew he was joking. No, in all seriousness, they don't care. Coach Fred's son is gay and he was on the team just last year, and he has a lesbian daughter too. No discrimination happens there because he'll be the first to stand up for any injustice. Wow, I didn't expect that, I reflected. So there's really no room for bullies? He shook his head. None, he said. In fact, Coach found out all of the mean things that those three fools have said and done, and he's taking them out of the team. Karma, I replied. Karma, Clark repeated as he grabbed my hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. The play was in 2 days, and we still had yet to find a replacement for Hannah. The other three boys were easy to replace since they were just side characters, but finding a lead was tough enough, and Mrs. Robbins was considering actually canceling the show. It was not until Liam suggested that I play the lead role that the crew's hopes were restored. Why don't you do it, Dennis? I mean, you've mastered pretty much the whole script. Your chemistry with Clark is unmatched, and you'd make a dashing lead, he gushed. Everyone agreed, and even Miss Robbins enthusiastically brought the idea, but I was nervous. I had never starred in the musical before. I have always been the one behind the scenes. Come on, Dee. You've wanted this since we were kids. I know you love directing and producing, but I also know you love acting too, said Liam as he grabbed my hand and encouraged me to take the role. This was my last push, and I agreed out of desperation to make A White Christmas successful. However, I noticed Clark glaring at Liam when he made the suggestion, and this even intensified when the latter grabbed my hand. After the rehearsals, I caught up with Clark, who simply walked away, not waiting for me, as he always did. Clark, what's wrong? I asked. Look, if you don't want me, just say so, okay? I'm not about to be a rebound or whatsoever, he said blankly. What? What are you talking about? I questioned. You and Liam, he exclaimed. I see the way that he's so attentive to you and how much he knows you. I also see how he makes you happy and how much his opinion means to you. We're not like that, and if he makes you happy, then go. I laughed at how absurd he sounded to me. He and Liam? No freaking way. We've been friends since we were in diapers. For goodness sake, we're practically brothers, and of course he makes me happy. He's my best friend. But you're my boyfriend, and you make me happier. Surely we don't know each other as much as I and Liam do, but that's the point of dating, right? Clark heaved a sigh of relief and walked towards me, evidently reassured after my explanation. So you and Liam are just friends? Best of friends, I confirmed. You have nothing to be jealous about, babe. Also, because guess what? Between you and me, Liam's most likely to fall for you. He's always had the hots for basketball guys. On the day of the musical, I was a bundle of nerves, but when I got backstage, I received a bouquet of tulips from Clark, which eased my worries tremendously. And then, it was showtime. It was such a dream come true not to only direct my own musical, but to star in it as well, along with the love of my life. It felt straight out of a dream, but I knew that Hannah would do everything in her capacity to make it a nightmare. So when she stood up in the middle of the musical and walked down the aisle, I wasn't even half surprised. She had used a disguise, wearing a red wig to sneakily get into the theater, seeing as Mrs. Robbins did not want her there for this exact reason. She would cause a scene, and true enough, she did. Oh, you poor, poor audience, she started, walking down the aisle and towards the stage. You think this gay man is enough as a lead character of A White Christmas? No, that's my role, and it will always be. I, Hannah Shepard, deserve to be on that stage way more than you, Dennis Payton. At this point, Mrs. Robbins was attempting to escort Hannah out, but to no avail. She escaped from the teacher's grip in no time. You, Dennis Payton, disgust me. How dare you stand there and play the role that's supposed to be for a woman? Be ashamed of yourself. You too, Clark Stewart. You were throwing away years of friendship with me, Harold, Gilbert, and Charleston for this gay? Look at yourself in the mirror and reflect. Clark could not take it anymore and spoke up. Yes, I'm throwing it all away. I'm done watching you guys bully every innocent soul in this school. You're under the impression that you're so intimidating by basically terrorizing every human being in this school, but you're wrong. I was wrong and I'm correcting it now. You guys are cowards, insecure cowards, and I'm finally mustering up the courage to stand up against you because unlike you, I have some balls. Hannah snickered, dismissing Clark's speech. Balls? Really? You're gay and you're lecturing me about growing some balls? Oh, please. That's enough, Miss Jenkins, our principal boomed. You're officially expelled from Woodgrove, Miss Shepard. I've tried my best to give you chance after chance because of your father, but you crossed the line. That's right, there's no room for discrimination here, another teacher chimed in. A lot of agreeing hums followed. Be ashamed of yourself for being homophobic towards these two young men. You're studying in such a good school and yet your values are trash, a parent in the audience shouted. Much too ashamed, Hannah ran out of the theater in tears. Still, the show went on and became a massive success despite the interruption. As the cast was being introduced and we were all gathering on stage, I felt an immense wave of relief. I survived my first musical with flying colors. It was successful and our effort was not in vain. As the cast was about to take their final bow before the curtains closed, I grabbed Clark's hand and he enclosed my small hands in his big ones. He placed a gentle kiss on my knuckles before we bowed to the audience, hand in hand, ready for the future that awaits us. Conclusion. It has been months since the play and I've been in a relationship with Clark since. He has been balancing his academic work, baseball games, and other theater practices as we're planning to produce another play before we graduate in June. In fact, for our college applications, we decided to apply to the same universities, so we could be together throughout college and beyond. Liam is also elated these days, seeing as we set him up on a blind date with one of Clark's basketball teammates, and he has been over the moon since. On the flip side, we just heard that Hannah Shepard has officially moved out of the state after her father found out about her meltdown during a White Christmas musical. His father was also apparently being sued by the school for threatening school officials and bribing them just to grant Hannah special favors, such as her getting the lead role in the musical initially. Gilbert, Charleston, and Harold were all removed from the basketball team as their coach found out that they were supporting Hannah and her homophobic sentiments towards me and Clark. What goes around truly comes around. I never would have known that the person whom I thought was a bully was actually a soft, kind-hearted man who was deeply misunderstood because of his circle of friends. But now that I know better, I could not be ever happier that this so-called school bully could teach me passion and love in ways I never knew existed. The end. Do you think name-calling and teasing can be justified when we're doing it to people we like or have a crush on? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.
Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.